You weren't cut off by accident. You were selected for disposal because your loyalty signals weakness, your access leaks value, and your presence threatens nobody. You were taught a comforting lie, that people leave because of misunderstandings, stress, timing, or growth. That lie keeps you docile. The truth is colder. Social systems don't drift, they select. When someone cuts you off, it isn't chaos, it's a decision made under an invisible cost-benefit calculation. Every human group operates like a quiet marketplace. Attention, access, information, emotional labor, protection, everything has a price. You were evaluated not on intention, but on yield. When your presence stopped increasing their position, you became friction. Friction gets removed. This is the lens shift. Stop interpreting rejection as emotion. Start reading it as logistics. People don't keep what leaks value. They don't protect what can't defend itself. They don't invest in what's predictable and soft. When you offer loyalty without leverage, availability without scarcity, transparency without power, you signal expendability. You train them how to treat you. Notice the pattern. The cut is rarely dramatic. It's quiet. Messages slow. Invitations disappear. Decisions get made without you. This is not cruelty. It's efficiency. In nature, predators don't announce the kill. In organizations, redundancy is eliminated silently. In relationships, low-utility connections are severed without ceremony. You felt blindsided because you were operating under moral rules in a strategic environment. This is where most men fail. They assume shared history equals protection. It doesn't. History only matters if it converts into present leverage. Past favors decay. Emotional deposits depreciate. The only currency that doesn't inflate is current value. Understand this. Being nice is not a shield. It's often the reason you're removed. Niceness signals compliance. Compliance invites extraction. Once extraction peaks, disposal follows. You weren't betrayed. You were used correctly. Groups prune constantly. Friends, families, workplaces, even romantic bonds, they all cull. Not because they are evil, but because survival systems hate dead weight. When pressure rises, sentiment drops. The first to go are the ones who soothe, support, listen, and adapt without resistance. They are easy to replace and impossible to respect. Ask yourself the brutal questions you've avoided. What happens to their position if I'm gone? What do I control that they can't replicate? What cost do they pay for removing me? If the answers are nothing, nothing, and none, the cut was inevitable. This chapter isn't about blaming them. Blame is irrelevant. This is about stripping you of illusions. You were operating as if relationships were sanctuaries. They are not. They are arenas. And arenas reward strength, not sincerity. Once you accept the cut as selection, your posture changes. You stop begging for explanations. You stop chasing closure. You stop trying to be understood. Those behaviors only confirm the original verdict. Low threat, high need. Selection doesn't care about your pain. It responds to pressure. And pressure exposes hierarchy. The purpose of this lens shift is surgical. It removes emotion from analysis. It forces you to see the cut not as an ending, but as data. Data about how you are perceived. Data about what you lack. Data about what must be rebuilt or killed. If you misread the cut as injustice, you'll repeat it. If you read it as instruction, you evolve. From here on, abandon the question, why did they leave me? Replace it with, what did my presence fail to control? That question is the doorway out of disposability. Expendability is not about being disliked. That's the comforting misread. Expendability is about being easy to replace. And humans are ruthless accountants when deciding who stays and who goes. The core mechanism is simple. People subconsciously rank others by cost, utility, and risk. If removing you creates no loss and keeping you creates maintenance, the equation resolves itself. You are cut. No hatred required. Most men never see this because they confuse emotional closeness with structural importance. They think intimacy equals security. It doesn't. Intimacy without leverage accelerates disposability. When someone knows you too well and needs you too little, you become background noise, then silence. Here's the mechanism working in real time. First, value leakage. You give too much to freely time, emotional, labor, advice, availability. You think generosity builds bonds. In reality, uncontrolled generosity collapses perceived value. Scarcity creates gravity. Abundance creates indifference. Second, boundary collapse. You tolerate disrespect, delays, cancellations, and emotional dumping. You call it patience. They read it as weakness. Boundaries are not about control, they are about signaling cost. No cost means no respect. No respect means no retention. Third, predictability. You respond fast. You forgive quickly. You explain yourself. You are emotionally legible. This feels virtuous. Strategically, it's fatal. Predictable assets are easily replaced. Volatility creates caution. Caution creates preservation. Fourth, lack of asymmetric advantage. You don't control access, information, opportunity, or emotional states. Your presence doesn't shift outcomes. When you leave a room, nothing changes. Systems only protect what alters the game. Put these together and a conclusion forms in the other person's mind, often without words. This person is safe to lose. That's expendability. Notice what's missing from this analysis. Morality, loyalty, kindness, history, none of it matters under pressure. When resources tighten time, attention, status, humans revert to selection logic. They keep what strengthens them and shed what doesn't. This is why explanations are never given. You don't explain to a tool why it's being replaced. You just upgrade. And here's the uncomfortable inversion. The more you try to prove your worth after you sense distance, the faster the cut finalizes. Chasing clarity signals fear of loss. Fear confirms low rank. Low rank justifies removal. Expendable people overcommunicate. They ask questions. They seek reassurance. They try to negotiate relevance. Each move compounds the verdict. Understand this clearly. People don't discard threats. They manage them. They don't cut off assets. They renegotiate terms. Only liabilities are erased. So ask yourself again, but sharper. What do I make harder for them if I'm gone? What uncertainty do I introduce by my absence? What leverage collapses when I withdraw? If the answer is none, then psychologically, you were already gone long before the cut. This chapter isn't here to harden you emotionally. It's here to recalibrate your self-perception. You weren't unlucky. You weren't misunderstood. You were structurally optional. And optional men are the first to be removed. The solution is not to become colder emotionally. It's to become more expensive structurally. That requires understanding the archetypes of disposability, the behavioral patterns that broadcast replace me before anyone says a word. That's next. Selection systems don't remove individuals randomly. They remove patterns. If you were cut off, it's because you were playing a role that history has already labeled disposable. These archetypes repeat across friendships, families, workplaces, and relationships. Different settings, same outcome. The first is the utility mule. You carry weight that isn't yours. You solve problems, absorb stress, fill gaps, and stabilize chaos. You are useful but only in maintenance mode. The moment the system upgrades or no longer needs fixing, you're excess labor. Mules aren't promoted. They're replaced when worn down. The mule mistakes usefulness for power. Fatal error. Power is not about effort. It's about leverage. When your value comes from endurance instead of control, you're always one alternative away from disposal. The second archetype is the emotional sink. You listen. You validate. You absorb. People unload their fears, failures, and insecurities onto you. You feel needed. In reality, you're being used as a psychological trash bin. Once the pressure releases or a new sink appears, you're discarded. Emotional sinks are comforting, not threatening. Comfort is replaceable. Strength is not. The third is the loyal soldier. You defend people who wouldn't defend you. You stay when leaving would be rational. You mistake loyalty for honor. In modern hierarchies, loyalty without rank is exploitation. Leaders keep soldiers who increase their dominance. They abandon soldiers who follow blindly. Blind loyalty signals low self-respect. Low self-respect invites extraction. Once extracted, you'll cut loose. The fourth archetype is the transparent man. You explain yourself. You reveal intentions. You show your hand early. You believe openness builds trust. It doesn't. It removes mystery and collapses tension. Transparency makes you readable. Readable makes you predictable. Predictable makes you safe. Safe makes you removable. Systems don't fear what they understand completely. The fifth archetype is the peripheral presence. You're there but not central. Included but not essential. Known but not influential. You orbit power instead of shaping it. When restructuring happens, peripheral pieces are the first to go. This archetype is the most dangerous because it feels included until it's erased. You mistake proximity for importance. They never did. Here's the brutal common denominator. All disposable archetypes prioritize harmony over position. They smooth friction instead of creating stakes. They adapt instead of asserting. They serve instead of selecting. And selection is everything. Notice who never gets cut off cleanly. The unpredictable. The resource controllers. The ones who leave gaps when absent. The ones whose silence changes dynamics. They may be disliked. They may be feared. But they are managed, not erased. Disposability is behavioral, not personal. That's the key inversion most men resist. You don't get cut off because of who you are internally. You get cut off because of how you function in the system. Change the function, and the outcome changes. But here's the warning. Once an archetype is identified, it's rarely forgiven. Systems remember roles. When you try to shift too late, you trigger resistance. People prefer replacing you to renegotiating you. That's why cuts feel final. They usually are. This chapter is meant to strip you of comforting self-images. If you recognized yourself in more than one archetype, that's not coincidence, it's convergence. Systems love multi-use tools. They discard them once depleted. The next step is darker, because disposability doesn't stop at social circles. It's wired into human nature itself. And until you understand why humans cull, you'll keep mistaking survival behavior for personal betrayal. That's where this goes next. Cutting people off feels personal because you still believe humans are guided by ethics first and survival second. That belief is ornamental. Underneath it sits an older engine selection. And selection does not negotiate. Culling is not cruelty. It is compression. When environments tighten socially, economically, emotionally, systems reduce load. They keep what increases survival odds and remove what consumes resources without multiplying strength. This behavior predates language. Tribes expelled the weak not out of malice, but arithmetic. Too many mouths, not enough food. Armies abandoned injured soldiers to preserve momentum. Kingdoms eliminated allies who outlived their usefulness. Modern society pretends it's evolved beyond this, but the algorithm is unchanged, only sanitized. Today, the cull is social instead of physical. You are removed from circles, ignored in networks, ghosted in relationships, sidelined at work. Same mechanism, different theater. Here's the hard truth. Humans instinctively distance themselves from non-threatening weakness. Not weakness paired with danger that gets managed, but weakness paired with access that gets eliminated. Why? Because weak proximity is contagious. People fear association with decline. They fear being pulled down, slowed, or drained when someone around them signals stagnation, emotional neediness, or diminishing returns. The instinct is to create distance fast and quietly. This is why cuts accelerate during transitions. New jobs, new relationships, status shifts, scarcity phases. When someone levels up, they audit their environment. Anything that reflects an older, weaker version of themselves becomes intolerable. You weren't just low value. You were a mirror they no longer wanted. History is brutal about this. Empires didn't fall because of enemies alone. They fell because internal inefficiencies were tolerated too long. Once pressure mounted, purges followed. Advisors, generals, allies removed overnight. Loyalty did not save them. Utility did. Human nature hasn't softened. It's just better dressed. And understand this inversion clearly. People often cut off those who helped them most. Why? Because helpers know too much. They saw the climb. They remember the weakness. Once ascension happens, proximity to witnesses becomes a liability. So the helper must go. This is why men who were there from the beginning are often the first erased. You symbolize a chapter they're trying to bury. Erasing you feels like erasing the past. Again, selection, not emotion. The mistake is thinking morality restrains this process. It doesn't. Morality is applied after survival decisions are made, not before. Humans rationalize what benefits them. They don't sacrifice advantage for virtue unless forced. That's why asking how could they do this is a dead question. They did it because it worked. The deeper threat is this. If you remain readable as weak, useful, loyal, or static, the cull will repeat across environments. Different faces, same outcome. The algorithm will find you again. This chapter isn't meant to make you cynical. Cynicism is passive. This is meant to make you alert, to force you to accept that selection is constant and mercy is conditional. Once you see culling as natural, you stop pleading for inclusion. You start designing yourself to be expensive to remove. That shift is strategic, not emotional. And it begins with a controlled response, not reactive pain, not bitterness, but deliberate repositioning. That's where we go next. Once you understand selection, the worst move is to cling. Clinging confirms the verdict. It tells the system you have no leverage, only attachment. That accelerates removal. The correct response is not confrontation, not explanation, not emotional closure. It is controlled withdrawal. Power does not argue for relevance. It creates absence and lets the vacuum speak. Strategic self-removal means you exit before you are erased. You reduce access deliberately. You stop offering unsolicited value. You become slower, less predictable, less available. Not out of spite, out of recalibration. This is where most men fail. They withdraw emotionally but stay structurally exposed. They go silent but remain accessible. That's not repositioning. That's sulking. The system doesn't notice. Real withdrawal creates friction. You stop stabilizing chaos. You stop smoothing tension. You stop being the reliable fallback. When something breaks, you don't rush to fix it. When silence appears, you don't fill it. When invitations dry up, you don't chase replacements. You let the cost surface. Scarcity is not absence, it's controlled access. If your presence was free, it had no perceived value. When access becomes conditional, the system recalculates. Some will panic. Some will test. Some will ignore you completely. Their reaction tells you everything. If nothing changes, you are already irrelevant. That's information, not insult. It tells you this environment cannot be renegotiated. You don't repair dead structures. You replace them. If tension appears, questions, discomfort, subtle reach outs, then your absence altered equilibrium. That's leverage emerging. You don't rush back. You renegotiate terms through behavior, not words. This is also where you must rebuild asymmetry. You acquire skills, resources, networks, and competencies that are not emotionally interchangeable. You stop being valuable because you care. You become valuable because you shift outcomes. Outcomes command respect. Feelings invite management. Repositioning also means tightening boundaries until they sting. Late replies become normal. Over-explaining ends. Emotional labor is rationed. You listen less and observe more. You speak with intent, not availability. This will label you cold. That label is protection. Warmth without power attracts extraction. Distance with capability attracts negotiation. Understand the deeper play. You are training others how to treat you by how difficult you are to replace. Some connections will collapse under this. Shift good they were parasitic or peripheral. Others will stabilize at a higher level of respect. Fewer people, higher stakes. This is not about dominance displays. It's about structural dignity. When your absence creates problems, your presence gains weight. When your silence changes behavior, your voice gains authority. Do not announce this shift. Announcements are bids for validation. Strategy is silent. The men who survive selection don't plead to stay. They make staying the expensive option. But understand this clearly. Repositioning alone is not enough if you carry the same internal identity. Old identities leak through behavior. They sabotage boundaries. They crave reassurance. They overcorrect. To become non-disposable permanently, something harsher is required. The old version of you, the loyal, transparent, endlessly useful one, cannot be upgraded. He must be terminated. That's next. Repositioning fails if the same identity is operating underneath. Behavior is downstream of self-concept. If the old version survives, it will leak through tone, timing, explanation, overgiving, and the system will read it instantly. So this is not refinement. This is execution. The identity that gets cut off is not unlucky. It is structurally flawed. It was built to be liked, needed, trusted, and included. Those goals sound harmless. They are not. They produce men optimized for approval, not survival. That identity must die. The first thing to kill is the need to be understood. Explanation is a weakness masquerading as clarity. Powerful men are misinterpreted all the time. They don't correct it. They let results speak. When you feel the urge to clarify yourself, you are revealing dependency on perception. Kill it. Next, terminate the helper reflex, the impulse to fix, rescue, advise, or stabilize without being asked. This reflex broadcasts to things: you derive value from usefulness, and you tolerate imbalance. Systems exploit both. Assistance must become conditional, rare, and strategic, or it becomes a liability. Then remove the loyalty fantasy. Loyalty is not moral. It is transactional. You give it only where there is rank, reciprocity, and cost. Loyalty without leverage is submission with better branding. The old identity confuses endurance with honor. Endurance without authority is just prolonged extraction. Kill it. Also execute emotional transparency, not stoicism opacity. You stop narrating your inner world. You stop volunteering feelings. You stop signaling where you stand before it's required. Information is power. The old identity gave it away to feel close. Closeness is irrelevant. Control is not. This identity death will feel like isolation at first. That's expected. The old version was socially lubricated. The new one is selective. Fewer interactions. More consequence. Less validation. More leverage. Here's the key shift. You stop trying to be included and start deciding who qualifies. Selection reverses direction. You are no longer auditioning. You are auditing. This changes everything. Your time tightens. Your energy narrows. Your attention becomes expensive. You do less explaining and more observing. You stop reacting to being cut off because you already detached your worth from inclusion. When you speak, it's deliberate. When you move, it's timed. When you withdraw, it's final. The system senses this immediately, not consciously, but viscerally. Men who have killed the old identity feel heavier in the room. Not louder, not aggressive, heavier. Their absence is felt. Their presence recalibrates behavior. This is the replacement identity, the sovereign operator. He is not cruel. He is precise. He is not cold. He is contained. He is not distant. He is unreachable without value. Most will never meet this version of you. That's the point. Some will test you, hoping the old you is still alive. They'll push boundaries. They'll bait explanations. They'll offer crumbs of attention. If you bite, the execution failed. If you don't, the new hierarchy stabilizes. Identity death is irreversible by design. You don't toggle it on and off. You don't try it out. You burn the bridge so retreat is impossible. That's how men stop being cut off by becoming too costly to misread. One final chapter remains, not instruction warning. Here is the rule you don't get told because it offends comfort. No one is entitled to permanence. Not in friendships, not in families, not in loyalty. Only relevance buys time. You are either maintained, managed, or removed. If you reach this chapter and still want fairness, you missed the lesson. Fairness is a story weak positions tell themselves to endure loss. Selection doesn't care. Systems reward what protects them and erase what burdens them. This is the final inversion. Being cut off is not the danger. Remaining cuttable is. Most men adapt just enough to survive one removal, then regress. They rebuild the same identity in a new environment, hoping for a different outcome. The algorithm catches them again, quieter, faster, more efficiently. You don't get unlimited resets. Every cut trains people how easily you can be erased. Reputation hardens. Roles fossilize. At some point, you're not removed, you're preemptively excluded. That's the end state of disposability. So understand the warning clearly. If your presence does not shift leverage, outcomes, or equilibrium, you are already on borrowed time. Warmth won't save you. History won't save you. Intentions won't save you. Only structural value does. This means you must live with a permanent edge, not aggression readiness. You must assume every environment is provisional. Every bond is conditional. Every position must be defended through relevance. This doesn't make life empty. It makes it exact. You stop wasting energy on those who don't feel your absence. You stop bleeding value into systems that wouldn't notice your exit. You stop mistaking familiarity for protection. And you begin operating with a quiet discipline. Where am I irreplaceable? Where am I optional? Where am I being harvested? These questions never stop. This is the elite divide. Most men want to belong. A smaller number want to endure. Fewer still want sovereignty. Sovereignty is lonely, but it is stable. If you remain useful, you are negotiated with. If you remain unpredictable, you are respected. If you remain expensive to remove, you are preserved. If not, you vanish. No announcement, no explanation, just silence where you used to be. Choose accordingly.